We've reached a new high or a new low, depending on your perspective, in the United States in the growth of income inequality. And the 400 richest Americans are now paying a lower total tax rate, federal, state, and local, than any other income group. This is based on 2018 data, which has now been analyzed. There's a really good piece in the New York Times by David Leonhardt, I'm not exactly sure how he pronounces his last name, about this. And when you look at the data and the visualizations of the data, back in 1950, the top 400 richest Americans paid the most in taxes when you combined federal, state, and local. 50 years later, even in the year 2000, the richest 400 didn't pay the highest total rates, but it was still a much higher rate than the poor and middle class. You still had the very rich, but not quite as rich as the richest 400, paying slightly higher rates than the richest 400. But no question that those richest 400 were paying a higher total rate, federal, state, and local, than lower income earners. And then last year in 2018, the richest 400 actually paid the lowest total rate of any income group. Now, you might see that, you might hear me say this and wonder, how is that possible? Because when you look at the federal tax brackets for 2018, for example, we see that the tax bracket is highest at 37% for those earning over $500,000. But what you need to understand is that we're talking here about a group, the richest 400, that is so far above the entryway to that top bracket of 500,000 that they have so many different mechanisms for deductions and loopholes and exclusions and the moving around of money on paper that they now are paying the lowest combined federal, state, and local rate of any income group. Now, let's discuss a common argument that we hear from the American right wing, which is, listen, whatever rules you pass, whatever tax law you change, the rich will figure out a way to avoid those taxes. So what's the point? They'll get better accountants. They will somehow figure out a way to avoid those taxes. This is completely untrue. Number one, look at the historical numbers I just showed you, right? I mean, the rich have historically not avoided all taxes and paid the lowest rates. They used to pay more than lower income brackets. So historically, we know that that argument is bogus. Number two, oh, and I should mention, we're talking about the very, very rich here. We're talking about the richest 400, the richest 0.1%. We are not talking about a doctor making $300,000. Okay, that's not who we're talking about here. And it's important to understand that there is a distinction here. Number two, historically, attempts to collect more taxes have worked. We know that when we look at historical tax collections. And number three, if the rich could just avoid any new taxes, why would they work so hard? Why would they spend so much time and money and political capital fighting new taxes? Because they know that they would be affected by them. So that argument is a completely bogus and ridiculous argument. These are basically just choices to be made by societies. And the trick, of course, by the very rich and corporations and the upper class is to foment class warfare down below. This has always been the technique. You hear from some brainwashed right-wingers that the left of the middle class and the lower middle class, the poor, are the ones fighting and pushing, race warfare, class warfare, that if it weren't for them, then everything would just be completely fine. But understand that this is a technique that the very rich use. Look at the battle between American-born restaurant and agricultural workers and so-called illegals from Latin America coming here to steal your jobs. That is a battle that corporate America and the super rich and the upper class want you to be having. Why? Because if you, as an American-born restaurant worker, are fighting against the idea of some hardworking Mexican dad coming here to, quote, steal your job, you are not going to be fighting the actual people that are deciding policy and that are controlling the system and maintaining the status quo. It is by design. Another example, while the super rich and corporate media talk about millennials are lazy and this and that, it's the super rich who win by being ignored. They take the focus off of the fact that the student loan burden on millennials is astronomical. They remove any discussion whatsoever of how the ratio between the cost of college and the salary one expects to earn has fallen completely out of whack compared to what it was 30, 40 years ago. This is all by design, and it is really important that we not allow that to distract us from what actually needs to be done when it comes to policy. Because when we're having the wrong debate, they win. That's the sick genius of it. They don't care who wins these false debates, right? If you're a big corporation and you benefit from cheap labor and deregulation of labor and all of this stuff, do you care whether the quote illegals win against the poor American born white people in the battle around who's going to steal whose job? No. The fact that it's a battle that is even going on means that you win. And this is what we fundamentally have to understand when we look at these numbers. So inequality certainly getting worse and worse, partially on the back of a tax code that now has the richest 400 Americans in the lowest total tax bracket when you combine federal, state, and local.